In 2025, the idea of professionalism seems to be under review. Many employees now log into meetings in whatever they happen to be wearing, while company leaders have made late-night work messages a regular part of office life. The lines between personal time and work hours are thinner than ever, and nobody can quite agree on what counts as professional anymore. At the same time, hiring managers are reporting a drop in motivation, initiative, and basic etiquette among new graduates. Younger workers feel less engaged at work, and older employees aren't sure what the new rules are supposed to be. With both sides frustrated, it's worth asking if our standards for professionalism are fading, or just changing into something we barely recognize. This shift is especially visible in how we dress for work, if we even bother to change out of pajamas before a meeting. The pajama meeting phenomenon. What's become known as the pajama meeting phenomenon is now a defining feature of remote work culture. When offices closed and video conferencing became the norm, the old rules about work attire faded fast. At home, people began prioritizing comfort over appearance, and the line between professional and personal dress blurred almost overnight. Employees started showing up to virtual meetings in whatever made sense for their day. Sometimes that meant sweatshirts, sometimes pajamas, and occasionally something even more casual. This wasn't just a matter of convenience. It reflected a deeper shift in how workers relate to their jobs and to each other. The new informality, though, hasn't been without its awkward moments. Hiring managers and HR professionals have collected stories that would have seemed outlandish just a few years ago. One manager recounted having to explain to an intern that removing undergarments in the office, even if it's just visible on camera, crosses a line. Another described a team leader oversharing personal medical details during a meeting, leaving colleagues unsure how to respond. These anecdotes point to a larger challenge. Without clear boundaries, it's easy for remote work to drift into territory that feels unprofessional or uncomfortable. HR teams find themselves fielding complaints not just about what people wear, but about what they say and how much of their private lives they share on company time. This blurring of boundaries is a source of tension across generations. Younger employees are much more likely to dismiss the idea that formal dress codes matter, seeing them as outdated relics of a more rigid era. According to LinkedIn and Grammarly's research on workplace communication, younger professionals tend to value comfort and personal expression, while older colleagues continue to view attire as a signal of credibility and respect. The result is a workplace where assumptions about what's appropriate can differ dramatically, sometimes leading to misunderstandings or even open conflict. Company culture plays a decisive role in how these norms develop. In technology firms and creative industries, relaxed dress codes are now the rule rather than the exception. Employees are often encouraged to express themselves, and the emphasis is on results, not appearance. Some companies even issue handbooks that explicitly state employees should wear whatever helps them focus, whether that's a hoodie, a novelty t-shirt, or something more eccentric. In contrast, sectors like finance, law, and healthcare still hold fast to traditional standards. Formal attire remains mandatory for client-facing interactions, and deviations are met with warnings or even disciplinary action. These contrasting approaches create a patchwork of expectations, where what's acceptable in one industry might be grounds for reprimand in another. This divergence is also reflected in how organizations handle incidents that test the limits of remote professionalism. In some cases, employees have faced serious consequences for their attire or behavior during virtual meetings. A consulting firm terminated an employee for attending a training session while obviously lying in bed, citing the need to demonstrate you're actually awake as a basic standard. Meanwhile, viral moments on social media have highlighted the risks of letting standards slip too far. A Goldman Sachs analyst was famously called out in real time during a Zoom call for not wearing pants. These moments sparked debates about where to draw the line and who gets to decide what's professional in a virtual world. The connection between dress and productivity is less clear-cut than many assume. While some experts argue that relaxed attire helps employees feel more comfortable and less stressed, others believe that dressing up, even at home, can boost confidence and focus. Workplace surveys, such as those conducted by Pumble, reveal that employees often feel more self-assured in traditional business attire, even if their actual work output doesn't change. This suggests that the psychological effects of clothing are real, but they may not always translate into measurable differences in performance. For many, the act of dressing for work is as much about signaling readiness to themselves as it is about meeting external expectations. The debate over pajamas and professionalism isn't just about clothes. It's about the broader question of what it means to be professional in an environment where the old markers, like suits, office desks, and in-person meetings, are no longer reliable. In some companies, efforts to reintroduce formality have backfired. One tech firm tried instituting a formal Friday policy, requiring everyone to dress up for virtual meetings once a week. The result wasn't improved productivity. Instead, complaints spiked, and even the CEO forgot the dress code on a client call, leading to more confusion than cohesion. The consequences of inconsistent expectations are real. Research from Gartner indicates that teams with loose or poorly defined dress codes tend to experience more conflicts over workload and deadlines. Psychologists suggest that when visible signs of professionalism disappear, other sources of friction become more noticeable. Employees start to notice small lapses in etiquette or communication, and minor issues can escalate in the absence of clear guidelines. This dynamic puts pressure on managers to strike a balance between flexibility and structure, ensuring that everyone understands what's expected without resorting to rigid or outdated rules. Despite the ongoing debates, the trend toward casual dress in remote work appears to be here to stay. Surveys from OWL Labs and other workplace researchers show that most knowledge workers now operate without formal dress codes, even as they maintain traditional work hours. The emphasis has shifted from appearance to output, with many organizations evaluating employees based on results rather than how they look on camera. At the same time, some industries remain resistant to change, holding onto formal standards as a way to signal seriousness and reliability to clients and partners. The symbolic weight of clothing in the workplace shouldn't be underestimated. When employees at a marketing agency staged a pajama protest in response to return-to-office mandates, management initially responded by requiring ties on camera. But after a noticeable dip in productivity and morale, the policy was quietly dropped. This episode illustrates a recurring lesson. While dress codes can serve as a tool for signaling professionalism, they are no substitute for genuine engagement and results. What people wear may matter less than how they contribute, especially in a world where the boundaries between work and home are increasingly porous. Productivity tracking has added another layer to the conversation. Some companies have implemented systems to monitor not just what employees wear, but also the tidiness of their backgrounds and how they present themselves on video calls. In one case, an HR department introduced a professionalism points system that penalized workers for messy environments, only to discover that the time spent adjusting cameras and backgrounds was costing the company more in lost productivity than any perceived benefit. These efforts reveal the limits of trying to enforce traditional standards in a context where the realities of work have changed so dramatically. Ultimately, the pajama meeting phenomenon forces organizations to reconsider what really matters in a professional setting. Is it about maintaining appearances or about delivering results? The evidence suggests that focusing too much on superficial markers can distract from more important issues like communication, collaboration, and accountability. Where companies set the bar for professionalism can shape everything from morale to productivity, but rigid enforcement of dress codes is rarely the answer. The debate over remote work attire is just one facet of a larger conversation about evolving workplace norms. As employees and managers navigate new expectations, the challenge is to create environments that balance comfort with respect, flexibility with clarity. The most successful organizations may be those that recognize the symbolic power of dress without letting it overshadow the substance of the work itself. While the conversation about what to wear on camera continues, another shift is taking place behind the scenes. Increasingly, the boundaries between work and personal time are being tested not just by what employees wear, but by when and how they are expected to be available. This new reality is raising questions about the cost of constant connectivity and the pressures it places on workers at every level. Midnight slackers. Midnight slackers, the term now widely used to describe the late-night digital grind, captures a reality that's become all too familiar for remote and hybrid workers. The workday, once neatly confined to office hours, has expanded into evenings and weekends, fueled by the rise of instant messaging platforms and the unspoken expectation that employees are always just a notification away. While email still dominates as the main channel for work communication, chat tools like Slack and Microsoft Teams have rapidly closed the gap, making it easier than ever for managers and colleagues to reach out at any hour, regardless of time zone or personal commitments. This shift isn't just about convenience. The proliferation of digital communication tools has fundamentally altered the rhythm of work. Employees now find themselves reading and responding to work messages long after dinner, sometimes out of habit, but more often because they feel they have no choice. In a recent survey, a significant portion of knowledge workers reported that the expectation to be available after hours is one of the top sources of workplace stress. Many cite the pressure to respond immediately, not because they're eager to impress, but because they fear being labeled as uncommitted or unresponsive. The reality is that the boundary between work and personal life has eroded, and with it, the ability to fully disconnect and recharge. The invisible overtime economy is not some abstract phenomenon. It's measurable in both hours and dollars. Reports show that more than half of remote workers are clocking in longer days than they did in the office, with many working hours that spill well past the traditional 9 to 5. The cost of this unpaid labor is staggering. Pollock Peacebuilding estimates that $359 billion in paid hours are lost each year to workplace conflict, much of it fueled by the stress and miscommunication that thrive in environments where boundaries are weak and expectations are unclear. It's not just about missing a few hours of sleep. It's about the cumulative toll that constant, low-level anxiety takes on both mental health and productivity. Employees aren't just losing time, they're losing peace of mind. Gallup's research shows that 83% of U.S. workers now experience daily work-related stress, often tied directly to workloads and the inability to switch off. The symptoms are familiar: difficulty falling asleep, irritability, and a sense of never quite being off the clock. These issues aren't limited to a single industry or job type. Remote workers in particular report that the lack of a physical boundary between home and work makes it nearly impossible to draw the line. The laptop that sits open on the kitchen table is both a symbol of flexibility and a reminder that the next message could come at any moment. Employers often justify this culture of constant connectivity by citing the need for agility and productivity. They argue that quick responses keep projects moving and prevent bottlenecks, especially in industries where competition is fierce and deadlines are tight. But the data tells a different story. Teams that enforce clear boundaries around after-hours communication tend to meet their deadlines more consistently than those who expect round-the-clock availability. The illusion of responsiveness often masks deeper workflow issues, such as poor planning or unclear delegation. In fact, research suggests that the vast majority of late-night messages could easily wait until morning without any negative impact on outcomes. Generational differences only complicate the landscape. Younger workers, especially millennials and Gen Z, are more likely to set boundaries, silencing notifications and using autoresponders to protect their personal time. For them, work-life balance isn't a perk, it's a baseline expectation. Yet older managers often interpret these boundaries as a lack of dedication, leading to misunderstandings and, in some cases, outright conflict. The result is a workplace where trust erodes and engagement suffers, as employees weigh the risks of pushing back against established norms. The cultural shift is stark when compared to pre-pandemic norms. In 2019, most professionals could reasonably expect their evenings to be their own. After-hours emails were the exception, not the rule. Today, the expectation of immediate availability is so widespread that employees feel compelled to check their devices multiple times each night, just in case something urgent comes up. This constant vigilance is exhausting, and it undermines both job satisfaction and overall well-being. Stories of egregious after-hours demands have become part of corporate folklore. While it's tempting to dismiss them as outliers, the reality is that most employees have at least one story of a late-night or early morning message that could have waited. Workplace conflict is now so common that 85% of employees report experiencing some form of it, much of it linked to miscommunication and unclear boundaries. These conflicts don't just sap morale, they contribute directly to the burnout and attrition that so many companies now face. The toll of constant availability is visible in health metrics as well. Employees who regularly engage in after-hours communication report higher levels of stress, sleep disturbances, and even physical symptoms like elevated blood pressure. Family life suffers, too. Many workers admit to missing important personal events because they felt obligated to respond to a message or join a call. The result is a workforce that is both overworked and underrested, with little energy left for either their jobs or their lives outside of work. Corporate attempts to address these issues often fall short. Wellness programs and meditation apps are offered alongside performance metrics that reward rapid response times, sending a mixed message about what really matters. Employees quickly recognize the disconnect between rhetoric and reality, and the result is a sense of cynicism that further undermines engagement. Psychologists refer to this as wellness theater, a performance of concern that does little to address the root causes of stress and burnout. The generational divide continues to play out in subtle ways. Younger employees, having watched older colleagues burn out, are more likely to draw firm lines and use technology to protect their time. Autoresponders and do not disturb settings are now common tools in the arsenal of those seeking to maintain some semblance of work-life balance. Social media has amplified these efforts, with viral posts and videos highlighting the absurdity of after-hours demands and the creative ways employees push back. These moments resonate because they speak to a shared frustration, a sense that the system is rigged against anyone who values their time outside of work. Despite mounting evidence that constant connectivity undermines productivity, the myth persists that more availability equals better results. In reality, the most effective teams are those that prioritize focused work during regular hours and respect personal time outside of them. Output metrics consistently show that employees who maintain boundaries complete tasks more efficiently and make fewer mistakes. The belief that being always on is a virtue has proven difficult to shake, even as the costs become increasingly clear. The psychological impact of this culture is profound. Employees subjected to relentless after-hours messaging report higher rates of imposter syndrome, anxiety, and diminished confidence in their abilities. Therapists describe a new pattern of clients who compulsively check work apps during vacations, unable to relax for fear of missing something important. The line between diligence and hypervigilance has blurred, leaving many workers in a constant state of low-level panic. Some organizations have begun to experiment with solutions. A handful of companies have introduced quiet hours, during which non-urgent messages are held until the next business day. Others have banned internal emails after a certain time, forcing managers to plan ahead and communicate more effectively during regular hours. These policies have yielded promising results, with increases in both productivity and employee retention. Yet, such reforms remain the exception rather than the rule, as most employers remain hesitant to relinquish the perceived benefits of constant connectivity. Economic consequences are significant. Pollock Peacebuilding's estimate of $359 billion in paid hours lost to conflict each year offers a sobering perspective on the true cost of blurred boundaries and after-hours messaging. Every late-night email, every weekend Slack ping, chips away at both productivity and morale. Employees who remain on call, even during their personal time, are less focused, less creative, and ultimately less effective when they are actually working. What's driving this relentless pace? Partly, it's habit. The normalization of late-night messaging has created a feedback loop, where employees respond quickly because they fear being left behind, and managers continue to send messages because they know someone will answer. There's also a deeper anxiety at play, a fear of being seen as difficult, uncooperative, or not fully committed. In a culture that equates responsiveness with value, few are willing to risk standing out by setting boundaries. The result is a workplace defined less by results and more by availability. Employees are evaluated not just on what they accomplish, but on how quickly they respond, regardless of whether the issue at hand is truly urgent. This dynamic creates a climate of uncertainty, where no one is quite sure what's expected, and everyone feels the pressure to be on at all times. As the boundaries between work and life continue to blur, the definition of professionalism itself comes into question. Nearly two-thirds of workers now rate their workplaces as uncivil, and many are more likely to leave for employers who respect their time and well-being. The challenge for organizations is clear: set and enforce boundaries that protect employees from the creeping demands of constant connectivity, or risk losing talent to competitors who do. The consequences of these shifting norms extend beyond burnout and turnover. They shape the very fabric of workplace culture, influencing how employees communicate, collaborate, and solve problems together. As companies struggle to adapt, new challenges emerge, some of which have their roots not in the workplace, but in the classroom, where the next generation of workers is learning what it means to be professional in a world where the rules are always changing. AI cheating fallout. While employers continue to debate the boundaries of work hours and communication, another challenge has quietly reshaped the hiring landscape: the fallout from widespread AI use in education. Over the past few years, artificial intelligence has moved from a novelty to a mainstay in classrooms, changing not only how students complete assignments, but also how they prepare for life after graduation. This shift, meant to foster digital literacy, has instead exposed a growing skills gap that frustrates both hiring managers and new employees. Surveys of hiring managers paint a complicated picture. Many report that recent graduates arrive at their first jobs lacking essential skills, motivation, initiative, and even basic professionalism. The blame, some say, falls on an education system that has adapted to AI faster than it can teach students to use it responsibly. A 2024 survey found that only 58% of managers would consider hiring a 2025 graduate, a marked decline from previous years. Nearly half of the managers surveyed had let go of a recent graduate within their first 6 months, not because of technical incompetence alone, but because these hires struggled with tasks that required analytical thinking, independent problem solving, and the ability to work without digital shortcuts. The classroom, once a proving ground for developing these skills, has become a testing ground for AI's capabilities and its limits. As AI-generated essays, reports, and even exam answers proliferate, colleges and universities have struggled to keep up. Some institutions have responded by reverting to handwritten exams and in-person oral defenses, hoping to separate genuine skill from prompt engineering. One professor at a major state university noted that the shift back to pen and paper testing was not a nostalgic move, but a necessary response to the sheer volume of AI-assisted work passing as original thought. In some cases, entire curricula have been redesigned to minimize the possibility of AI cheating, but results remain mixed. The impact of this educational shift is felt most acutely in the workplace. Entry-level employees who relied on AI to complete their coursework often find themselves unprepared for jobs that require more than just the ability to generate a passable essay or solve a formula with an app. Employers describe new hires who freeze when asked to explain their reasoning or perform basic tasks without digital assistance. In one notable trend, hiring managers have encountered candidates who list ChatGPT prompting as a core skill on their resumes, yet struggle to answer follow-up questions that require industry-specific knowledge or critical thinking. The disconnect between academic achievement and workplace readiness has become a major source of frustration. Employers now routinely invest more in onboarding and remedial training than ever before. Corporate training budgets have ballooned, with companies reporting an average increase of over 30% for graduate development programs compared to just a few years ago. This includes not only technical upskilling, but also foundational refreshers in math, writing, and verbal communication, areas where AI reliance has left clear gaps. One financial services firm, for example, introduced critical thinking bootcamps after new analysts repeatedly submitted AI-generated reports that failed to meet even basic standards for accuracy and coherence. The reliance on AI tools in education has also changed the way students approach problem solving. Rather than wrestling with a difficult assignment or collaborating with peers to find a solution, many students simply outsource the task to a chatbot or automated essay writer. This habit, formed over years of schooling, can be difficult to break. Employers report that new hires often default to digital assistance before attempting to solve problems on their own, a tendency that undermines both initiative and confidence. The result is a growing perception among managers that younger workers are less prepared to handle ambiguity, troubleshoot issues, or take ownership of their work. This skills gap is not limited to technical knowledge or analytical ability. Basic workplace etiquette, such as communicating clearly, managing time, and collaborating with colleagues, has also suffered. In some cases, the lack of professionalism is striking. A recent survey found that nearly a quarter of job applicants admitted to bringing a parent to a job interview, a phenomenon that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Hiring managers, already wary of graduates' reliance on technology, now face the added challenge of onboarding employees who may have little experience with the norms and expectations of a professional environment. The problem is compounded by inconsistent responses from educational institutions. Some universities have banned AI tools outright, hoping to restore academic integrity by eliminating the temptation to cheat. Others have opted for a more permissive approach, teaching students to responsibly use AI while offering little guidance on where to draw the line. In one business school, students are required to disclose AI use in their assignments, but there are no penalties for doing so. This ambiguity leaves graduates with the impression that all workplaces will tolerate, or even encourage, the same level of reliance on digital tools. Employers, for their part, find themselves caught in a paradox. Many companies have embraced AI productivity tools to streamline workflows and boost efficiency. Yet these same organizations express frustration when new hires lean too heavily on the technology, using it as a substitute for independent thought rather than as an aid. One consulting firm partner described the experience of watching a junior associate paste client data into an AI tool during a meeting, bypassing the opportunity to analyze the information themselves. "We use AI too," she said, "but not as a replacement for thinking." The consequences of this over-reliance can be costly. In some cases, organizations have discovered that junior employees are unable to complete basic tasks without digital assistance. For example, a software company uncovered that one of its developers had been using AI to write code without understanding the underlying logic, leading to repeated system failures and lost productivity. These incidents have prompted some firms to introduce AI detox programs, requiring employees to complete tasks without digital tools as a way to rebuild foundational skills. The generational divide around AI use is also becoming more pronounced. Older managers express frustration with younger workers' tendency to consult AI before attempting to solve problems independently. In one construction company, a project manager noted that his team would check an AI chatbot for safety protocols rather than refer to the OSHA manuals provided at the job site. This reliance on technology, even for critical information, raises concerns about both competence and accountability. Resume fraud has taken on new dimensions in this environment. HR departments increasingly encounter candidates who pad their CVs with AI-related skills, such as advanced AI collaboration, without being able to demonstrate any real expertise. Some applicants submit writing samples that are clearly AI-generated, only for hiring managers to uncover the truth during interviews or follow-up assessments. This has led some companies to implement more rigorous screening processes, including in-person skill tests and AI-proof challenges designed to assess genuine ability. The cost of training and remediation continues to rise. Companies now budget significantly more for graduate development programs than in previous years, reflecting the need to address both technical and soft skill deficiencies. One technology firm introduced a 6-week remedial Excel course after discovering that many new analysts could not perform basic spreadsheet tasks without step-by-step instructions. The same firm found that applicants performed significantly worse on offline assignments, suggesting that digital fluency does not always translate into practical competence. Some organizations have responded by designing hiring processes that test for skills AI cannot easily replicate. Engineering firms, for example, have introduced locked room design challenges and hands-on troubleshooting exercises to assess problem-solving ability without internet access. These proof-of-work tasks are intended to separate candidates who can think on their feet from those who rely on digital crutches. Educational institutions are not blind to these challenges. Some have taken decisive action to restore academic rigor and rebuild trust in their credentials. MIT, for example, now requires handwritten exams for core classes, while the University of Michigan has instituted oral defenses for major papers. These measures have produced tangible results, with graduates from these programs performing better on workplace readiness assessments than peers from schools with more relaxed policies. Still, such efforts remain the exception rather than the rule. The liability risks associated with AI reliance are growing more serious. In healthcare, for instance, cases have emerged where staff relied on AI tools for critical decision-making, bypassing established protocols and endangering patient safety. Investigations into these incidents have revealed that some employees never fully learned the fundamentals during their training, having depended on chatbots and digital aids throughout their education. The need for basic workplace training has never been clearer. Law firms report spending significant time explaining to new hires that legal research involves more than prompt engineering or querying an AI. Managers in other industries find themselves teaching fundamental skills, such as verifying statistics and cross-checking sources, that previous generations learned in school or early on the job. The absence of these competencies leads to workflow inefficiencies, as teams spend extra hours correcting AI-generated errors and fact-checking reports that should have been accurate from the start. Some of the most telling data comes from exit interviews and post-hiring assessments. A growing number of graduates who are dismissed for poor performance attribute their struggles to unrealistic workplace expectations, rather than their own lack of preparation. This mindset reflects a broader shift in educational culture, where reliance on digital tools has become so normalized that unaided competence is seen as an unreasonable demand. The prevalence of AI cheating in education has prompted some schools to overhaul their curricula entirely. Reports indicate that AI-assisted assignments became so widespread that institutions reverted to pencil and paper testing, oral exams, and other analog methods to ensure genuine learning. These changes, while effective in some cases, have not yet reversed the overall trend. Employers still report that many new hires are unprepared for the realities of the workplace, with skills gaps that extend beyond technical knowledge to include communication, conflict resolution, and critical thinking. The lack of basic training is not limited to technical skills. Pollock Peacebuilding found that 60% of employees never received formal conflict management instruction, a gap that mirrors the broader absence of foundational workplace preparation. This deficiency contributes to misunderstandings, reduced morale, and higher turnover, as new employees struggle to navigate the interpersonal demands of their roles. Some industries have adapted more successfully than others. Technology companies increasingly value candidates who can critique AI outputs and identify when digital assistance falls short, a skill that remains rare among recent graduates. In more traditional fields, such as accounting and law, the inability to perform manual calculations or conduct original research has become a significant liability. The divide between digital fluency and practical competence continues to widen, creating challenges for both employers and employees. Employers have experimented with a range of solutions. Some conduct surprise skill assessments months after hiring, only to find that a significant portion of new employees regress without constant access to AI. Others have introduced AI amnesty programs, encouraging honest disclosure of tool reliance in the hope of fostering more realistic expectations and better training outcomes. These efforts, while well-intentioned, often reveal that many graduates overestimate their abilities when separated from digital aids. The workplace readiness crisis shows little sign of abating. As AI continues to shape both education and employment, companies face the ongoing challenge of hiring candidates who are both digitally literate and capable of independent thought. The paradox is clear. Employers want workers who can use technology effectively, but not as a substitute for core competencies. Until educational systems and workplaces align their expectations, the gap between classroom preparation and job performance will persist. The long-term effects of AI's integration into education remain uncertain. As today's AI-assisted students move into management and leadership roles, workplace standards may shift to accommodate new norms, or companies may split into those that demand genuine expertise and those that accept AI-mediated competence. For now, the transition is marked by confusion, increased costs, and a persistent mismatch between what employers need and what new hires can deliver. The question of what counts as professional is no longer limited to skills and knowledge. Increasingly, it extends to appearance, attitude, and the subtle signals that shape first impressions. As organizations grapple with these evolving standards, the symbols of professionalism, once clear and consistent, are now up for debate. T-shirt CEOs. Leadership style is now as likely to be signaled by a CEO's wardrobe as by their annual report. The image of the executive in a sharp suit has been gradually replaced by a new archetype, the T-shirt CEO. This change didn't arise from a single moment, but from a slow shift in workplace culture, one that began in the tech sector and spread outward, encouraged by the rise of remote work and a growing emphasis on authenticity over tradition. The casualization of executive attire traces back to Silicon Valley, where companies like Google and Facebook built their brands on the idea that comfort and creativity should override formal constraints. The open-plan offices, beanbag chairs, and hoodies were not just aesthetic choices, they were signals that the old rules no longer applied. This approach was rooted in the belief that a relaxed environment would foster innovation and encourage employees to spend more time at work. Over time, the look became synonymous with competence in the digital economy, and eventually, other industries began to follow suit, sometimes literally. The T-shirt CEO phenomenon is as much about perception as practicality. In tech, a leader who dresses down is often seen as a visionary, someone unconcerned with superficial markers of authority. The example of Sam Bankman-Fried, who became famous for his unkempt appearance, illustrates how unconventional dress can be interpreted as a sign of genius or disruptive thinking, at least until the underlying reality is exposed. The trend has not been universally embraced, though. In more traditional sectors, casual attire can still be read as a lack of seriousness or respect, especially in settings where established norms hold sway. Global differences in executive dress remain pronounced. In Japan and Germany, formal business attire is still the standard for corporate leaders, with little sign of change. British executives are more divided, while in the United States the move toward casual dress is most visible. Even within the same country, expectations can vary widely depending on the industry, company culture, and the age of the leadership team. As organizations continue to navigate hybrid and remote work, the boundaries between personal and professional presentation have grown even more porous. The debate over what executives should wear is, at its core, a debate over what professionalism means. For some, the shift away from suits represents progress, a rejection of empty rituals in favor of substance. For others, it signals a decline in standards and a loss of respect for the seriousness of leadership roles. The reality is more complicated. While casual dress may make leaders seem approachable and relatable, it can also introduce ambiguity about authority and expectations, especially in cross-cultural or high-stakes situations. Research into workplace culture suggests that the best approach is not a rigid dress code, but an emphasis on situational awareness and respect for context. Some companies have responded by developing flexible guidelines, encouraging leaders to adapt their appearance to the audience and the occasion. This performance dressing is now common, with executives choosing formal attire for investor meetings or crisis management, and reverting to casual clothes for internal brainstorming sessions or recruitment events targeting younger talent. The message is clear: there is no single standard anymore, and the most effective leaders are those who can read the room and adjust accordingly. The evolution of executive dress has also exposed new double standards, particularly for women in leadership. Female CEOs and board members often face stricter scrutiny for their clothing choices, navigating a narrower range of what is considered acceptable professional attire. Male executives are more likely to get away with casual looks, while women risk being judged as either too informal or trying too hard to fit in. These unwritten rules reflect broader issues around gender and authority in the workplace, and they remain a source of frustration for many. Despite the growing acceptance of casual dress, some boundaries persist. While jeans and sneakers are now common in many boardrooms, there are still limits to what is considered appropriate, especially in industries like finance, law, and healthcare. The expectation that leaders will dress up for certain occasions, such as major announcements, regulatory hearings, or international negotiations, remains intact, even as day-to-day norms have relaxed. This suggests that the move toward casual attire is not a wholesale rejection of formality, but rather an expansion of what is possible. The influence of executive dress extends beyond the C-suite. When leaders adopt a more relaxed style, employees often follow suit, though not always with the same freedom. The hierarchy of dress remains, with higher-ranking staff enjoying more latitude in their choices. This unspoken rule can create confusion for new hires or junior employees, who may not know where the line is drawn. As a result, many organizations now offer guidance or training on appropriate attire, emphasizing the importance of context and audience over any fixed set of rules. The rise of remote work has accelerated these changes. With fewer opportunities for in-person interaction, visual cues have become even more important. The Zoom uniform, a crisp shirt or blazer worn over sweatpants, has become a symbol of the new workplace reality, where only the visible half counts. Some executives have embraced this hybrid approach, while others have abandoned formality altogether. The result is a patchwork of standards, with each company, and often each team, developing its own norms. Psychologists studying workplace behavior note that the signaling power of clothing is changing. Where a suit once conveyed authority and competence, it may now come across as out of touch or overly rigid, especially in younger or more creative industries. At the same time, extreme casualness no longer signals innovation by default. As more leaders adopt the t-shirt and jeans look, the novelty has worn off, and attention shifts to other markers of credibility, such as communication skills, expertise, and the ability to deliver results. The paradox is that as dress codes become less prescriptive, expectations have become more complex. Leaders are judged not just on what they wear, but on how well they match their appearance to the situation at hand. The risk of misreading the audience is real, and the consequences can be significant. Stories still circulate of executives losing deals or credibility because they failed to recognize the importance of formality in a particular context. These incidents serve as reminders that clothing, while less important than it once was, still carries meaning. Industry differences are especially pronounced. In technology and creative fields, casual dress is now the norm, and leaders who show up in suits may even be viewed with suspicion. In contrast, sectors like banking, law, and pharmaceuticals continue to value traditional attire, especially in client-facing roles. Multinational companies face additional challenges as they navigate varying expectations across regions and cultures. Some have responded by developing detailed dress codes for different markets, while others rely on training and cultural sensitivity programs to prepare leaders for global interactions. The generational divide is another factor shaping the future of executive dress. Younger leaders are more likely to reject formal wear, viewing it as outdated or performative. Their preferences are influenced by broader cultural trends, including the rise of streetwear and a focus on authenticity. As Gen Z and millennials move into senior roles, the definition of professional attire is likely to continue evolving. However, even among younger workers, there is recognition that certain situations call for a more polished look, especially when credibility or trust is at stake. Ethical considerations are also coming to the fore. Some younger investors and employees pay close attention to the sourcing and sustainability of executive wardrobes, viewing ethical fashion choices as a marker of integrity. This shift suggests that the future of professional dress will not only be about style or comfort, but also about values and transparency. Technology may soon disrupt dress codes in new ways. With the increasing use of virtual meetings and augmented reality, it is possible to imagine a future where executives project digital avatars or wear virtual suits, tailoring their appearance to each audience without sacrificing personal comfort. This would represent the ultimate form of situational professionalism, where the visual signals are entirely customizable. Despite all these changes, the core values of professionalism remain unchanged. Guidance from business educators and researchers emphasizes that integrity, respect, and competence are still the foundation of effective leadership, regardless of what someone wears. Dress codes may have relaxed, but the expectations for ethical conduct and accountability have not. In this sense, the debate over executive attire is less about fashion than about the ongoing negotiation of trust and authority in the workplace. The challenge for organizations is to balance flexibility with clarity, giving leaders the freedom to express themselves while maintaining standards that support credibility and cohesion. This often means developing nuanced policies that recognize the diversity of roles, audiences, and cultural contexts. It also requires ongoing communication, so that everyone understands not just what is allowed, but why certain choices matter. As companies continue to adapt, the question of what counts as professional will remain open. The answer will depend on a mix of tradition, innovation, audience expectations, and the evolving norms of each industry. For now, the T-shirt CEO stands as a symbol of both the possibilities and the ambiguities of modern leadership. The shift away from rigid dress codes offers opportunities for greater authenticity and inclusion, but it also demands a higher level of awareness and adaptability from those in charge. The focus on appearance, however, sometimes obscures a more pressing issue: the gap between how leaders present themselves and how effectively they perform. As the conversation about professionalism moves beyond clothing, attention is turning to the qualities that actually drive results. The polite incompetence. For years, the workplace has quietly rewarded a type of employee who excels at looking the part but falters when it comes to actual results. This phenomenon, sometimes called the polite incompetent, isn't just an office joke or a passing annoyance. It's a persistent feature of modern organizations, and it's one that costs real productivity. Many companies still place a premium on surface professionalism, polished language, punctuality, and the right dress code. These markers are easy to observe and measure, so they become the default yardstick for performance, even when they have little to do with whether the work actually gets done. The problem is that these signals can easily mask skill gaps. When the bar is set by how someone presents themselves, it's possible for employees to advance by focusing on appearance and etiquette rather than substance. The result is a workplace where the most professional team members might also be the least effective, while those who actually drive results get sidelined for being too blunt, too unconventional, or simply not fitting the mold. Corporate jargon is one of the most common tools for this performance. A Columbia Business School study found that jargon often operates as a coping mechanism for those struggling to keep up with their tasks. Instead of addressing problems directly, employees learn to navigate meetings with phrases like, "let's touch base offline," or "move the needle," language that sounds competent but often obscures the real issues. The research also showed that overusing jargon correlates with poorer decision-making, as it creates a fog that makes it harder to identify what actually needs to be done. The more a conversation relies on buzzwords, the less likely it is that anyone will leave with a clear sense of next steps. This habit isn't just a quirk of personality. In many organizations, performance reviews and promotion criteria still favor employees who are skilled at the rituals of professionalism, crafting careful emails, attending every meeting, and maintaining a pleasant demeanor. According to a 2024 Harris poll conducted for Grammarly, 55% of professionals feel they spend too much time crafting and deciphering messages, rather than actually solving problems. The time and energy spent on maintaining a professional front can easily become a substitute for meaningful work. The consequences of these misplaced incentives show up in all kinds of ways. In creative industries, teams that rack up awards for innovation often do so by ignoring the unwritten rules of office decorum. Their work may be rough around the edges, but it solves real problems and satisfies clients. In contrast, teams that score high on professionalism metrics may deliver projects that are technically flawless in presentation, but fail to move the business forward. The same pattern appears in fields as varied as education, technology, and healthcare. Teachers who focus on classroom appearance and parent communication sometimes do so at the expense of student outcomes. Engineers who are difficult or unpolished by HR standards may be the ones who catch critical errors or produce the most reliable code. In medicine, the resident praised for bedside manner and paperwork compliance might overlook a subtle but important symptom, while the less polished colleague makes the correct diagnosis. What makes this dynamic so persistent is the way it gets built into company systems. Training programs often reward employees for mastering the visible aspects of professionalism, using the right PowerPoint template, following meeting etiquette, or submitting tidy reports. These are the behaviors that get noticed and praised, so they become the focus of employee development. The actual results, meanwhile, can become secondary. Managers are not immune to this trap. Exit interviews and employee surveys frequently reveal frustration with supervisors who are skilled at the performance of leadership, but lack a real understanding of their team's work. These managers may run efficient meetings, give polished feedback, and maintain a positive tone, but they struggle to provide meaningful guidance or solve real problems. This leads to a disconnect between what employees need and what management delivers, fueling turnover and disengagement. The gap between professionalism and competence is not just a matter of individual style, it shapes entire workplace cultures. In some industries, the pressure to appear professional is so strong that employees spend more time managing impressions than doing their jobs. In others, the pendulum swings the other way, and results are all that matter, regardless of how they are achieved. The most effective organizations are those that find a balance, rewarding both the ability to communicate clearly and the capacity to deliver on objectives. Conflict is often a byproduct of these misaligned priorities. Gallup research shows that a significant portion of workplace conflict, 35%, arises from issues related to workload, while another third of employees experience conflict at least once a year. When employees feel they must choose between being polite and being effective, collaboration suffers. The surface calm of a professional environment can hide deeper tensions and unresolved problems, which eventually bubble up in missed deadlines, poor performance, or high turnover. Some companies have started to recognize these patterns and are trying to adjust. Performance reviews are being rewritten to place more emphasis on measurable output and less on how that output is presented. In a few organizations, transparency around actual contributions, such as publishing the results of projects or making code repositories open to all, has shifted the focus from appearance to substance. These changes can be uncomfortable, especially for those who have built their careers on the rituals of professionalism, but they are necessary if organizations want to remain competitive. The challenge is that it's much easier to measure professionalism than competence. Anyone can check if an email is well written or a meeting starts on time. It's harder to assess whether a project truly met its goals or if a team's work actually improved the business. This leads to a reliance on proxies, behaviors that are easy to observe and quantify, but may have little connection to real performance. The tension between polish and substance is especially visible in industries that rely heavily on client relationships or public perception. In law, finance, and consulting, the ability to present oneself well is often seen as a prerequisite for success. But even in these fields, the most effective practitioners are those who can back up their professional presentation with expertise and results. When the balance tips too far toward appearance, clients and customers eventually notice, and the reputation of the organization suffers. Younger workers are increasingly skeptical of the old markers of professionalism. Surveys show that many Gen Z employees see acting professional as a kind of cover for not knowing what you're doing. They point to managers who schedule unnecessary meetings or deliver vague, jargon-filled answers, and they are less willing to accept style in place of substance. This generational shift may force companies to rethink what they value and how they measure success. The risks of overvaluing professionalism are not just theoretical. When critical decisions are made based on presentation rather than evidence, mistakes become more likely. In high-stakes environments, whether it's engineering, healthcare, or finance, the cost of getting it wrong can be enormous. The history of workplace disasters is littered with examples of teams that looked good on paper, but missed the warning signs that only a more critical, less polished eye would have caught. At the same time, it's important not to swing too far in the other direction. Professionalism does serve a purpose. It sets standards for how people interact, helps maintain order, and can make collaboration easier. The problem arises when these standards become ends in themselves, disconnected from the actual goals of the organization. When the rituals of professionalism outweigh the substance of the work, everyone loses. Companies that want to close the gap between appearance and competence need to rethink their incentives. This means evaluating employees on what they actually achieve, not just how they present themselves. It also means creating space for honest feedback, even when it's uncomfortable, and rewarding those who solve problems rather than just talk about them. Some organizations are experimenting with radical transparency, making actual output visible to everyone. This can be a powerful corrective, exposing the difference between those who contribute and those who simply perform. The shift away from performative professionalism is likely to accelerate as technology automates more of the visible markers of office life. AI tools can now write emails, schedule meetings, and even generate reports that look polished and professional. As these tasks become automated, what's left is the work that can't be faked: creative problem solving, critical thinking, and the ability to deliver real results. The polite incompetence, those who have built their careers on looking the part, may find it harder to hide. In the end, the definition of professionalism is changing. The old signals still matter, but they are no longer enough. Companies that want to thrive need to align their standards with what actually drives performance. That means valuing competence at least as much as polish, and being willing to challenge the habits and rituals that have long defined professional life. As organizations confront these realities, the meaning of professionalism continues to evolve. The workplace is moving toward a model where results and well-being take precedence over appearances and empty rituals. Whether this shift will finally put an end to the era of the polite incompetent remains to be seen, but it is clear that the incentives are changing. Across industries, the meaning of professionalism is being redefined. In 2025, companies are shifting away from old markers like strict dress codes or scripted behavior, and focusing instead on what actually drives results: competence, clear communication, and respect. Mental health has moved to the center of workplace culture, with organizations recognizing that well-being and productivity go hand in hand. The most effective workplaces now support employees with access to mental health resources, flexible arrangements, and managers trained to foster open dialogue. True professionalism is less about appearances and more about delivering real value and maintaining a healthy, respectful environment.